you don't always know in advance which conversations are going to change the course of your life.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes you just think you're talking to a stranger at a party, and then 10 years later, you realize I've been in the relationship with this person 10 years, and now we have a dog and 2 kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And you didn't know that in advance. But sometimes you do have a sense in advance that this conversation is going to matter. And when you have a sense that this matters and the outcome is important, it's so high leverage to take an extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes and prepare for it in this way. Welcome to Making Yourself Clear. I'm Chris.
I'm Patrick.
And today we're going to talk about how to prepare for high-stakes conversations.
That's a good one. Walking into any conversation, sometimes you might walk away and just go, what happened there? Where did I go wrong? Something went off the rails there. What happened?
Yeah, that's likely a familiar experience. You go into a conversation and then come out of it going, I'm not sure what that was.
Yeah.
I don't know what got accomplished. Maybe it's a conversation in your private life. Maybe it's a meeting at work.
Sure.
This is a common one. We've all had meetings where you're there for an hour and maybe there's a large group of highly paid people in a boardroom. And at the end of it, you're just like, I'm not sure at all what was accomplished there.
Yeah. Yeah. So you wind up confused, drained, frustrated, or sometimes we go in with a plan and we wind up in the opposite situation, right? You find yourself in the middle of a misunderstanding or a conflict. And it's not always because of something you said. Sometimes it's because of something that you didn't say, something that you didn't put into space. So having a way to build a conversation and to build an interaction, that would be a pretty helpful tool.
I would say so. So what we're going to talk about today is how to do that before the conversation or before the meeting. So this is the pre-work. And we're going to present a 3-part framework, which is really an intention setting exercise. And it's often the intention piece that's missing. If you go into something with a vaguely defined intention, you're going to get vague results or ambiguous results, or it'll kind of go sideways and you're more likely to lose control of the thing.
Right.
Whereas if you're crystal clear on what you want to accomplish, why you're doing it, and how you want to show up, you've got a much better shot of succeeding. A wise man once told me that the secret to your effectiveness in life broadly is being clear on your intentions. And he also said that human beings are remarkably effective at fulfilling on our intentions, but we're pretty terrible at knowing what those really are.
Right. So if we could find a way to plan or reverse engineer what our intentions are, and then go into that with a specific mindset, then that's the tool that we're looking at unpacking today.
Consciously create an intention or a set of intentions. Because the other thing is we often have multiple conflicting intentions behind a lot of the things we do.
Yeah, that's true. So getting clear about what the higher purpose is.
Yeah. And designing it on purpose, and then having your intention as a thing you can true yourself up to in order to stay on track.
So that's what we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about a tool called CPR. So CPR stands for context, purpose, and results. When you don't have those 3 things, you're just kind of winging a conversation. And sometimes winging it works, but oftentimes we find ourselves, especially in high stakes interactions, then that's not the case, right? So that's where crafting a CPR comes in. It's a simple framework, but invites you to slow down and be intentional about where we're going. So we're going to break it down. What is context? What does it mean to know your purpose? And then how do you define results in a conversation? One of the things we want to watch out for is not turning it into a list of things that we want to hit, right? We don't want it to be transactional, but what do you want to get out of the interaction?
So context, purpose, results. Maybe we should say a few words about what we mean by each of those things, just to clarify.
Let's dive into each one and do a little bit of a definition. So context is who you're being when you show up. So it's not the content of the conversation, but rather, I said mindset earlier, right? So your energy, your presence, how are you showing up? Your true north. Who do I want to be? How do I want to be?
Yeah, you can think of it like a stance. It's kind of like where you're coming from in the interaction.
Right. If we're intentional about where we want to come from, then we can always true up to that. Like you said, I know that I want to be curious in this engagement. I know that I want to be confident in this engagement. I want to be receptive to whatever my partner in this engagement is coming to me with. I want to be firm. So those are all contexts, right? The thing about context is if you're not choosing a context, you're still showing up with one.
That's a really good point. You always are coming from somewhere. It's just by going through an exercise like this, you are consciously designing what that's going to be, rather than just defaulting to something automatic or reactive.
A mentor of mine always says, no matter where I go, I show up. And so what he means by that is, regardless of the interaction you're having, you have a default setting. You have a default way of being. So going in with a context means I'm not going to go in my default mode, because oftentimes our default modes they're not the optimal space to be coming from.
And even if your default is going to be effective, you can still consciously choose it.
Right?
Like, you can consciously choose the default setting. The key distinction here is whether it's a mindful choice or whether it's just an automatic autopilot sort of way of being that you didn't choose and you just find yourself in. And this can be, there's an infinite number of contexts we can come from, or virtually infinite. And it can be anything from playful and fun and light to serious to, drill sergeant mode.
Right.
And there's no right or wrong. It's something you get to choose based on what calls to you.
Yeah. So the next piece is purpose, right? So we're segueing to the why. When you're clear on your purpose, you're anchored. You can redirect things when things veer off course. You can check in with yourself.
If you're familiar with Simon Sinek's work, he had a TED Talk that went super viral 15 years ago on start with why. And it's the big why behind what you're doing. And again, we'll say more about that as we move on, but that's probably a good enough intro for now.
Yeah.
And then the last piece is the results. So this is, if the context is the who am I going to be? And the purpose is the why, the results are the what.
Right.
What am I trying to accomplish? And when we talk about results, one common framework for thinking about results is in terms of, say, SMART goals, specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, time-bound.
Mm-hmm.
Not all of your results have to hit all of those check marks, but the point being the results are the measurable changes you're trying to cause out there in the world that are observable
to
an outsider. So these are, and they can be subjective as well.
If I want to measure a feeling or something like that, like I know how I felt, but I can't speak for somebody else. So that's not to say you can't have a result around, we laugh a couple of times. Like we laugh a couple of times. That's a yes or no, right?
Yeah.
We feel good. That's harder to measure, but we laugh together.
And it's reasonable to include the other person's subjective experience in the results that you're targeting.
Sure.
Like if you're going into a conversation to resolve a conflict, a reasonable result might be we both walk away feeling heard and understood and respected.
Yeah.
And you have firsthand knowledge of whether or not you felt that way. You can ask the other person. There are ways to try to make these things measurable, but you don't need to be a stickler for that part of it. It's really about getting clear on what the intentions are. When I'm doing one of these, I'll do it in bullet form and I'll just make bullet points of all the results I'd like to achieve. And I like to phrase them almost in the past tense. So I imagine myself on the other side of the conversation, presentation, interaction, whatever it is. And then I'll write out in the past tense, like the results have already happened. So I felt seen and understood. My counterpart felt valued and respected. We agreed on XYZ decision, whatever they are. And you just kind of bullet point them out. And it's useful to be precise and crisp and thorough here. So you don't want to say something like we talked about or discussed
right. Yeah.
project X or Y.
Yeah.
Okay. You discussed it. So what?
Yeah.
Right. Are you trying to get a decision made? Are you trying to update somebody on something? Are you trying to sell somebody something? Are you trying to get agreement?
Right.
Are you going on a date and your goal is to get a second date?
So we've talked about choosing who you're being. We've talked about anchoring your reason for having this interaction. And now we know what we want to come away with. So it sounds pretty basic, but when we're not doing it, we're just reacting. We're just in the moment. We're just winging it. And we're hoping that things will magically land where we want them to. It's much easier if we're clear on these couple of things: context, purpose, results.
I usually suggest if you're sitting down to work through this exercise, I like to start at the end and work backwards.
Yeah, I do the same thing, actually. Yeah. So there's no right or wrong way to start a CPR. Why is it that you do it that way?
I think because the results are usually the easiest for me to define.
I find that too. Yeah.
I say like, okay, at the end of this conversation, here's what I want to have achieved. That's easier for me to access.
Yeah.
And so I'll make those bullet points and maybe refine it, add to it. And I look at it from a couple of perspectives. I actually look at both objective results, so things that are observable and measurable, I also look at the subjective, the felt experience that I want to create for myself and the others. So if I'm giving a speech, I'll talk about how I want to feel. I'll talk about the reaction I want to get from the crowd, the experience I want to leave them with. So the objective and the subjective, and I'll work through the results piece. And then once that feels complete, I'll pause and I'll say, okay, so what is the big why behind all these results? There's like a unifying theme that unites them. And the purpose is not a bunch of bullet points. It's typically more like a sentence or maybe two that has some resonance and says, okay, yeah, this is meaningful. This is my motivation. This is why these results are valuable to me.
So deep dive on results. Getting results doesn't mean we're controlling the conversation or the interaction. We're not scripting where we want things to go. It's like Chris said, like, I want to walk out with this specific feeling. I want to know that we have made a decision around X or Y. Maybe it's something as simple as I want to see people nod their heads in agreement, like they're getting what I'm saying. You know, I want to see a couple of heads nod like, cool, I can check that box off. Yes, that happened. No, it didn't. So the more specific, the more measurable, the more binary.
And if it's a presentation or a speech or a performance of any sort, you can talk about how the crowd reacts. I got a few laughs. X number of laughs.
Yep.
Or I got a standing ovation. Or in the feedback form, I had people fill out at the end. X number of people filled them out and they commented on such and such valuable takeaway.
Yeah.
Something. So you can find ways to try to measure the impact of the conversation, even if much of it resides over there in someone else's experience.
And that's clarity, right? That gives us clear, yes, it happened. No, it didn't.
And sometimes the results are super clear. Like you're going into a promotion conversation with your boss. You probably won't leave with a promotion in the first conversation you bring it up with, but maybe you leave with your boss's commitment to work with you on a promo package and advocate for it in a calibration meeting the next promotion cycle,
right?
Let's say.
Yeah.
But the takeaway is agreement. Your boss commits to do a thing. So that's a measurable takeaway.
Some people fall into having vague results and that can really deter things. People can get stuck going into the conversation, you know, looking for a specific vibe. You know, I want to feel closer to somebody. That doesn't get me what I want out of the conversation in those high stakes interactions.
Yeah, it can be that, like depending. Sometimes your goals are emotional. If you're in conflict with, say, a romantic partner or a friend, sometimes the goal is to feel like the conflict is complete and feel closer and more respect and affinity and love and closeness with that person.
Yeah.
And that's a perfectly valid result. If you are setting out to have another person feel a certain way, right? Like you're going to apologize for something or have a make-up conversation after some rift in a relationship. At the end of the conversation, you'll know how you feel. And if part of your intention, if one of your results is I want the other person to also feel that this is resolved, ask them. You can check in and you can ask. And it's a kind of a reminder to say, like, the way that you know how you impacted someone else is to check in with them and ask them how they feel.
That could be one of your results.
Yeah.
You know?
The other person expresses that they feel heard,
seen, felt, whatever it is. Yeah. I think when we talked about our apologies that don't suck, that was part of it, right?
Yeah.
Checking in with another person.
Checking in for sure.
We talked about SMART results. It's an acronym. Specific. So exactly what do you want in this interaction? Measurable. How do you know that you got it? Yes, no, right? So the more binary that we can make it, the better we are. Again, doesn't mean that things have to be binary, but make things measurable.
But measurable in the sense that, you know, maybe you give a presentation and there's a rating system afterwards and you want 4 out of 5 stars on average.
Yeah.
That's measurable.
That's measurable.
It could be the design team agreed on the final dashboard layout for such and such software launch.
Right.
But the agreement is what's measurable. You either got to that agreement or you didn't.
So specific, measurable. The A stands for achievable, right? Is this something we can actually achieve?
And is it achievable within the time frame that you're specifying, right? So if you're going into a conversation, you want to say what's achievable by the end of this interaction. So whether that's 45 minutes from now or 3 hours from now, that's the timeline you're setting for what's achievable. So if it's part of a much larger project, scope it down to what you're trying to accomplish in this meeting. But it's also useful to prevent scope creep. I think we've probably all been in some kind of planning meeting at work where you talk about one thing and then that reminds you of another thing and then someone else takes it on a different tangent. And before you know it, the conversation's gone 6 kinds of sideways.
Yeah.
And you get way out ahead of yourself and you're now talking about decisions that you can't possibly make until 3 or 4 months from now. And you've essentially wasted your time. Whereas if you keep the focus on what are we here to accomplish in this meeting?
Right.
And let's bound the present conversation to what we're trying to get done here, then your meetings can be much tighter and much more focused and much punchier.
Well, and that comes back to your purpose, right? So scope creep, the scope creep killer, having a good purpose.
Having a clear purpose and specifying, and you can check in as you're going along. How are we doing in terms of these results?
Yep.
If you've achieved the result already, you can stop beating that dead horse. The horse is dead. You don't have to kick it anymore, right? Dead horse, check.
Dead horse, check. Relevant, does this actually serve the purpose? So we've got specific, measurable, achievable, relevant. Is this relevant to what we're doing? And then the last one is our T for time bound.
And this one's kind of baked in the context of preparing for an individual conversation or interaction. The time bound part is, what are we trying to achieve by the end of this conversation?
And also, potentially, if one of your results is we make a decision to do X, like have you created a time frame for that to be done, right?
Right. So that's another point here is, say you make a decision to do a certain thing. Okay, great. Some results might flow from that.
Right.
Like, who exactly has agreed to do what and by when?
Yeah.
Have you come up with a set of, not just we agreed to do X, it's who agreed to do what and by when is the next level, because you're going to want to have something concrete that you can hold people to. Another thing that I'm sure everyone's experienced in meetings, you come together and talk about a thing. There's this vague agreement that X should happen.
Right.
We all agree that X should happen. Great. Glad we're aligned. And then you go your separate ways and you're surprised weeks or months later when X didn't happen.
Yeah. How come nobody did it?
X didn't just happen itself.
I thought you were taking care of it.
Right. Well, I thought X was doing it.
Exactly.
It was like an autopoetic sort of thing. But, so if there's going to be an agreement that a thing should happen, you need to know who's going to do what by when.
Right. So those are our SMART results: specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, time bound.
There's a common experience where, let's say, your relationship partner comes home from work and they start complaining about something. And if you're anything like me, you've probably fallen into the trap of jumping right into solution mode.
Oh, you try and fix things too?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You just start telling them what they should do. Right?
Here are all of the things.
Here's what you got to do about that.
Yeah.
And then they get more upset because I've assumed that they want a solution. They maybe didn't. Maybe she just wanted to be heard and validated and empathized with.
Actually, this came up for me 3 days ago with a friend of mine. So I play in a band with him and he was fixing a friend's guitar. And the guitar came back and it didn't seem as though it was fixed. And so he went back to the drawing board and the friend who owned the guitar sort of said like, you've got to tell your buddy he didn't do a good job. And he was looking for me to give him some advice, but I didn't know that. So I was just kind of listening like, okay, great. And then finally I said like, what do you need from me? Like, what do you want here? And he's like, I really just want to know what you would do in this situation. Like, can you give me some advice? And so I did. I said, I think that you're the middleman right now and you need to just sort of extricate yourself from the situation, put these two people in contact with one another, and then you're not the telephone anymore. They can actually have a direct communication. And so he did. And that actually really helped the situation to just.
So in that case, he actually did want advice.
He did. Yeah. And in the situation you were describing, the person did not. Yeah.
Don't want advice. And I just default to giving it. And then they get more upset.
Right.
So in that case, I would speculate the result that they want is maybe just to be heard and to feel supported. But I'm assuming the result they want is my infinite wisdom on how to solve their problem. So getting clear on the result you want is super useful because you can ask for it. You can say, hey, I want to vent. I had a frustrating experience.
Right.
I don't need solutions. I just want you to empathize with me. Great. That tells the other person how to position themselves in the conversation.
Yeah.
And then off you go. And if you're on the receiving end and someone just launches into something and you're not sure what your role is in the conversation, ask.
I feel like that could be a whole other podcast too, asking for what we want or trying to figure out what someone else wants by asking those kinds of questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
100%. So results, what was the point there? The point was, to the extent that it's possible, get really clear on the specific measurable out there in the world kinds of results you want to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
And in conversations, those results are often, you're looking for agreement, you're looking for a decision to be made, you're looking for commitments to be made. Either you promise something to someone else or you get them to commit to something from you. So it's agreements, promises, requests in the world of objective out there measurable results. And then there's the emotional stuff too, the experiential, subjective. What do you want the other person to experience? What do you want to experience? What are the emotional results you want to create? And those are also valid. And you can make them more measurable in the sense that you can check in with the other person and ask what their experience was like. And then they can tell you. And that can take the purely subjective a step closer to being also measurable.
Do you limit yourself to a specific number of results? Or is it just kind of like, oh, I'll try and hit 20, 30, 40 different things in the one interaction?
Totally depends on the type of interaction I'm preparing for. Like sometimes it's just one, right? I want to ask my boss for a week off and I want them to agree. So one result, got it.
There you go.
Out of here.
Yeah.
Other times it's a much longer list. Obviously, you can't accomplish an infinite number of things in a finite meeting.
Yeah.
So you don't want to drown yourself in this.
There's no right or wrong there. You're going to guide it however you want to. My suggestion would be if you're going to use this technique, the fewer results you have, the more intentional you can be about hitting them.
Yeah. And you can look at it through the lens of, like, if I achieve this set of results, will this meeting, conversation, interaction, will this have been a success?
Yeah.
And because it's really an intention setting exercise more than a checklist sort of thing, it's, you get to say what feels right for you. Find the right level of granularity, but it's useful to get precise and specific here.
To that point, if I make too many results, sometimes results aren't met. What do we do if...
Yeah, I mean, none of this is a guarantee, right? It's an intention setting exercise. So it's, here's what I'm intending to accomplish.
Mm-hmm.
And it'll often be the case that you'll achieve many of the results, but not all.
Yeah.
But the idea is, by getting clear on the results you want up front, you know what the target is. Like, you know what the center of the bullseye is, you know what direction to shoot, and you're going to be more effective than if you go in without a clear sense of what you're trying to achieve.
I mean, the likelihood is, honestly, that this is probably not the one and only conversation. There will be more opportunities. In some cases, that's not the case. If it's a job interview, you probably only have one shot there.
So the job interview is a good example, because ultimately the result you want is a job, but you probably don't know at the end of the interview whether you got the job.
Right.
So the A in SMART, the achievable piece,
mm-hmm.
you probably don't want to put I got the job as one of the results from a job interview.
No, that could be your purpose, though.
It can be your bigger purpose, for sure, but it's not a result you're going to leave that conversation with in all likelihood. So don't include it. Include other things that you can know at the end of the conversation whether you've achieved or not.
Yeah, I felt like I presented my best self.
So that's results. Shall we switch gears and now talk about the purpose part, the why?
Yeah, I think we've done a good job diving deep on results. So now let's dive deep on purpose. It's your why. Why are you speaking? Why are you initiating this conversation? Why does this matter to you? What's the purpose of the conversation?
The purpose is something that speaks to you, because there's some surface level why, like, I'm going to this job interview because I want to get a job. Okay, but why do you want to get a job? Why is that important?
Right.
And is it just any job, or is it a particular kind of job?
And the more you can drill down on purpose, the higher the stakes are going to be for you, and the more driven you're going to be to get the results that you've put on paper.
There's an interesting exercise when it comes to the getting clear on the why. It's called the 5 whys, where basically, why are you wanting to do this? Why is this important to you? And you'll come up with your first answer.
Yeah.
And then it's, okay, why is that important? And that forces you to pause and dig a little deeper. And then you ask again, okay, why does that matter? And you go 5 rounds of it, and it can be give or take, but you just keep asking why until you come up with something where there is no further justification.
Yeah.
Where it's like, this is bedrock. This is just, this why is self-evident. I don't need to justify it. It just because.
Yeah.
And when you get to that, the expression of the why that is just self-evident, you've gotten to something constitutional.
Yeah.
Like, we take these fundamental truths to be self-evident just because this feels like me. And you might find yourself actually getting a little bit moved by it, because when you get to something that,
with a good purpose, for sure,
when it strikes a chord, it's like you'll feel seen by yourself on a level you might not have before.
Yeah.
And that's really, there can be a spark of inspiration, and you might get a little bit of like goosebumps on the back of your arms or something. Like, it'll really resonate deeply.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's not just, I want the sale to go well. It's, I want my business to succeed, or I want to be able to pass the legacy of this business on to my family, or something like that. Right. Like, so yeah, drill down on purpose. Ask yourself why a couple of times, or have someone else do it. That's a great exercise. Yeah.
I was on an initial kickoff call with a coaching client a while ago, and he was talking about wanting a promotion. Whenever anyone tells me they want to get a promotion, I go through this. Okay, why? Why is that important to you? And the reasons can be different for different people. For some people, it's about the money. And then again, you go through kind of the superficial reasons and you drill down. And we went through a few levels of why with him.
Yeah.
And what he landed on was he wanted to be a great role model for his sons.
So that's a great why, right? Yeah, I had a similar sort of interaction with someone who, I want to get to the gym more often. And okay, well, but why is that important? Well, I want to lose weight. I want to be healthier. Okay, great. But like, why? Why do you want to be healthier? Well, I want to live longer. Okay, why do you want to live longer? Because I want to be around for my family. Same sort of thing, right? Yeah. It came back to his sons. Like, I don't want to miss big moments because I'm not healthy. And
died sooner than I needed to because of some preventable disease or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. You might be surprised at the direction this takes you, because something like, I want to go to the gym. Why? I want to look better. I want to look better naked. Okay, great.
Okay, great.
But why? Well, because I want to feel attractive to my partner. Why? Well, because, and then you get into something intimate.
Yeah.
If you're paying attention, you get somewhere deeper than you might have expected, and you'll realize there's something inspiring behind it. And it's super useful to get in touch with what that is and to articulate it.
Yeah. The more meaningful you can make your purpose, the higher the stakes are, the more skin you have in the game.
Yeah. And it becomes a perfect segue, because as you peel back these different layers of why, your answers will start to sound more and more like expressions of who you want to be in the world.
Right.
Which takes us right into the last piece, which is
context. Yeah.
Which is really about who you're going to be and how you're going to show up in the conversation.
Yeah. Let's talk about purpose evolving. Can purpose sort of shift throughout the conversation? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, absolutely. Depending on the type of conversation, for sure. It happens all the time in coaching conversations where I'll start a call with a client saying, what would you like to achieve into this call?
I've had that, yeah.
And we spend a bit of time saying, okay, we've got 45 minutes. At the end of this call, if we've achieved X and Y, that'll be a win. And maybe we get 20 minutes in and the conversation feels like it wants to take a turn to the left. And when I sense that that's happening, I might check in and say, okay, so we started off saying you wanted X goal, and now it feels like we're heading in this different direction.
Yeah.
Is X still what you want, or is this new thread more appealing? And sometimes I'll say, no, let's go down this new road. Great. So you pivot, but you do it consciously.
I had an interaction with a client one time. She's a travel agent. And so she was saying, I really want to talk about the business and what I have to do next. And so anyway, we're talking about it. And by the end of the 30 minutes, we got to, I need to quit my other job so I can focus on my business. But that's not where we started. It was, how do I get more clients? And then we're talking. And then she sort of says like, it's the other job that I have. It's my night job that's getting in the way because I'm tired and I can't connect with people and I can't focus on my business. I think I need to quit the other job. And then, by the end of the conversation, the purpose of the call had shifted totally. And she said, I need to talk to my boss tomorrow and quit. And then the next week when I spoke to her and checked in with her, she was focused on her business because she didn't have that distraction anymore.
So some conversations, you want to leave flexibility for them to take a turn because you may end up somewhere more valuable. When I enter a coaching conversation, my purpose is to provide as much value as I can for my client, and they get to set the direction.
Right.
So my true north is kind of clarity and insight and helping them get closer to something that rings true for them, whatever that is, and that can change. But I don't have an agenda for where the conversation needs to end. But if I am trying to negotiate something, a real estate deal, let's say, then I might have a very different purpose. Like I want to get 10% off the price and I want them to agree to it. And I want to set the closing date back a month.
Right.
So those are concrete results. And I do have an agenda and I don't want to deviate much from it. If I go in to buy a house and I come out having bet $1,000 on the Maple Leafs game, something went sideways.
All right. So I think that's a pretty clear understanding of purpose. Anything else you feel like we may need to dive into on purpose?
No, this stuff becomes clearer in the doing of it. It's really an exercise you get a feel for as you go through it. And we're kind of expounding on this in a fairly long-winded way. The exercise itself doesn't have to be lengthy.
Yeah, we're just trying to give you a blueprint. So let's talk about context. We've talked about results. We've talked about what you want to get. We've talked about purpose, which is why you want those things. Now let's talk about your context. Who do you need to be? What mindset do you need to bring? A lot of people, when we talk about context, they think of circumstances, what's happening, who's in the room, what the topic is.
Yeah.
That's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about you. We're talking about your internal way of being, right? Your mindset, your emotional state, the energy that you're bringing into the room.
Yeah, it's an important distinction because typically when we think of context, we think of background information. And for the purposes of this exercise, we're using the word in a very different way.
Yeah.
It's just like you said, it's a way of being. And typically when you phrase this, you want it to be just a short phrase or a couple of words that will capture the essence of something for you. So it's not lengthy. It's just a couple of words to remind yourself of how you want to show up. And this becomes more resonant once you've gone through the process of, okay, here are the results I want. Here's why those matter. And you've gotten to something that really speaks to you. Okay, so if I'm trying to accomplish these things and this is my deep why, who do I need to be? What energy, what stance do I want to bring to the conversation so that I can achieve that?
Yeah.
So if I'm going in to resolve a conflict, do I want to be domineering and aggressive, or do I want to be curious and fluid and humble, or playful and light? And there's a number of different stances you can take. The key here is it's something that speaks to you, something that you can remind yourself of as you're about to walk in the door or you're about to sit down.
Well, it's funny that you mentioned stance, because when we had started this podcast, when we did the first one, I sent it to a couple of friends, and a friend of mine, Coco, she said to me, "You look a little nervous." I was like, "Well, yeah, it's the first one. Of course I'm nervous." And she said, "Well, you need to do the power stance. Do you know what the power stance is?" And I was like, "Do you mean the superhero stance where you put your, yeah, like that?" And she's like, "Yeah, you need to do a power stance before you go in and you record your episodes from now on. So just stand in the mirror and do your power stance." So, I mean, that's a context, right? Like power stance. I know exactly what I'm doing if I go in and I do that. Shout out to Coco. Thank you very much for that. Hopefully I don't look as nervous anymore.
Yeah. I had a client who was going into a negotiation with her CEO, she was a VP, highly successful, highly accomplished, but had been frustrated with what she perceived to be kind of not getting the respect or the resources that she needed from the CEO in order to really build out her part of the business.
Yeah.
And she came to me for coaching because she had a sense that there was something about how she was showing up that was interfering with her ability to get the attention and the resources that she wanted from leadership. So we worked on that, and we were going through this CPR exercise, and she's preparing to go in for this conversation and lay out a list of asks. And I was explaining like the context. I said, it doesn't have to make sense to anybody but you, is one thing. And it's just a phrase or a couple of words that'll just kind of click you into the right state. And the context she came up with was, she sort of chuckled, and I was like, "What's that?" And she says, "Well, I think I got one." I'm like, "What's that?" She says, "I'm going to fuck shit up." I'm going to go in there and I'm going to fuck shit up.
Right.
And that was like the context that gave her that sense of swagger and a little bit of bravado to go into the CEO. And rather than be intimidated and hesitant, it was a bold way of being. Obviously, she didn't declare that to him. This is for you. This is not something you announce.
Yeah. Don't go in and say, "Listen, I'm going to fuck shit up. Let's have this conversation." Yeah.
You might, but use your judgment.
Yeah.
But so that was, it spoke to her. It gave her a bit of a chuckle. It broke some of the tension, and it reminded her to be a little bit of that John Wayne swagger kind of energy.
Sure. Yeah. There's another one, John Wayne, right?
John Wayne.
I had a client and he said, "Oh yeah, my context is Stone Cold Steve Austin." It's like, what does that mean? Wow, he's an ass kicker. He goes in, he drinks beer, he doesn't take shit from anybody, same sort of thing as your client.
Yeah.
So your context can be all kinds of things. It can be lyrics to a song. It can be a song title. It could be a famous person, celebrity, fictional character. It could be someone in your life who exudes that energy that you want. Yeah, context is a very personal thing. But once you understand what it does, it's going to unlock the CPR for you. This is the key piece right here, is the context. And when you come up with your results and your purpose, your context might just click, right? And sometimes it might take a little bit to just figure that out.
This is one of the reasons I like to work it backwards.
Yeah.
Start with the concrete, tangible results, which are typically more grounded. They're easier to find because they're just naturally more accessible.
Yep.
And then the why takes a bit more digging until you get to, okay, here's my real why.
My real why, really
inspires me. And then having gone through all of that, the context flows more naturally.
It will usually pop up pretty quickly. You'll understand, like, in order to get these things, this is how I need to be. This is who I need to be. This is how I need to show up. So your context will probably click pretty quickly,
and there's no one right answer.
No.
This is a thing that you're creating for yourself because it gives you a place to stand, a place to come from. and it lights you up a little bit. It gives you some energy. It's one of these things where when you say it and it resonates, you'll naturally like snap into that.
Yeah.
And it'll give you a little bit of a vibe shift that you'll feel and that other people will feel, and it'll contribute to your effectiveness in the conversation.
And I like that you said position too. Like you called it a position. It's a stance. It's a posture. You could make this a physical thing. Like,
and that's a good point. These things, like a way of being, kind of encompasses a lot of things. It'll encompass your physicality, because there's ways of kind of, you can slump down and be kind of meek and mousy, and your body language will reflect that. Or if your body does that, then you'll feel that way, because the causality goes both ways.
There are a lot of exercises around body language and how you hold yourself, and how that affects your mindset.
And it'll affect the words you choose to use, the language, the emotional state. It's kind of the entirety of your being encapsulated in a couple of words that are useful to you.
Yeah. We talked about default settings earlier. Let's just go back on that for a minute. Default settings. So we have a default way of being, right? You have a default context.
Default ways of being for different scenarios, I would
say. Sure. Yeah. I mean, you're a different person with your friends than you are with your family. You're a different person with your children than you are with your work colleagues. So you have a default mode of being. Be aware of that you have a default mode. That's the other thing. If you're not aware of what your default is, then you're kind of stuck.
Yeah. And like, I work with a lot of people who would consider themselves, let's say, people pleasers. And there are settings in which it's useful to be oriented towards making other people happy. Like if you're in customer support or customer success, it's good to be a people pleaser. You want to please your customers.
Sure.
But when you're feeling overwhelmed because you've taken on too many commitments, and someone comes by, or your boss comes by and says, hey, can you handle this one more thing? And your default is to just say yes, even though the truth would be probably no. This is one of those instances where you want to consciously override the default. So even though the default is useful to you, perhaps in some settings, there are other settings in which it's suboptimal. And you want to have, the key thing here is that it's a conscious choice.
Yeah. I was listening to another podcast called Diary of a CEO, and I forget who the guest is. I wish I could remember. But in any case, he was saying, if you consider yourself a messy person, then when there's a mess, it's not going to bother you. But if you consider yourself to be, you're a tidy person, as soon as there's a mess around, that part of your brain that considers yourself to be a tidy person goes, well, I'm a tidy person. We can't have messes here. And he was talking about reprogramming your way of being. Even if you do consider yourself to be a messy person, if you start telling yourself, no, I'm a tidy person, that's going to start to kick in.
It's one of the big books that came out on habits a few years ago. It might have been either Atomic Habits or there were a couple of books on habits. I think I read them both. But in one of them, they talk about habits, not just on the level of what you're doing, but if you can connect them to your identity, then it becomes much more powerful. So it's not just, I want to work out 5 days a week. It's, I want to be the kind of person who does that. I'm a fitness guy. Now it's identity. It's not just, I want to do the thing called working out. It's,
that's who I am.
I'm a fitness enthusiast, or I'm a fit person. And it just gets into your being much deeper.
So again, just be aware of your defaults. If you're not, you can always ask people around, like, how do I show up for you? That's always great. It's a scary question to ask.
We have lots of different ways of being.
Yeah.
So
make sure
narrow the question. Like, how do I show up in arguments or in conflict?
Right.
Or how do I show up in unfamiliar social settings or whatever the situation is? And you may notice patterns. And we all have domains where we're more confident and domains where we're less confident. For example, some people are super confident in a one-on-one conversation, but get really nervous public speaking.
Yeah.
Other people are kind of the reverse. They're socially awkward in small groups, but come to life on stage. Think of Michael Jackson.
Right.
Yep. Just a dynamo on stage, but a little bit awkward in an interview.
Very true.
We all have domains where we show up differently in different settings. And sometimes it works for us, and sometimes it doesn't, or is not as effective as it could be.
Also, something to be aware of is your state when you walk in. So say you're having a conversation, you're frustrated, you're worried. Checking in with that context can just sort of dispel all of that momentary stuff as well. So that context is going to shape everything for you. If I walk in the door and I'm upset because I was just sitting in traffic and someone was a jerk and everything else, like that's what I'm sitting in.
And if you're like most people, who you are when you're frustrated, stuck in traffic is probably not going to be the most effective in any setting, not even that one.
No, not even that one.
Yeah. You come home from work, you're frustrated at traffic. You don't want to take it out on your family.
No, but we do. That's what I'm saying. Like that's that default way of being, right? Because I know it lives in my body. When I'm frustrated, I'm slumped forward and I'm angry. And so opening up and just taking a new stance, taking a new position, taking on a new context.
So we talked about quite a bit here. The whole intention setting exercise. You've got some kind of interaction. It's a conversation, a meeting, a presentation, an interview, a date, a performance, anything that's coming up where you've got an intention you're trying to realize and you want to get clear on what that is. So rather than just going in with a vaguely defined sense of what this is about and then winging it and hoping for the best, what we're advocating is going through this quick-ish exercise. Usually takes me 20 minutes, let's say, but
to write a CPR. Yeah.
And the first few times you do it, it might take a bit longer, but like anything, you get better at it with practice.
For sure.
But it's such a high leverage thing to do because the 20 minutes or so, half an hour at most that you spend getting clear on what are the results I want? Why are these results important to me? And how do I want to show up for this interaction in order to achieve those? Now you go in with this laser focused crystal clarity on why you're there, what you're doing, and how you're going to be. And do you really need to experience this to get how effective
it is? A game changer. It really is. Here's something you can reflect on. What's a context you've been slipping into lately without realizing it? Are you showing up checked out? Are you showing up frustrated from traffic? Are you trying to be the smartest person in the room? Are you showing up guarded in spaces where you don't need to be guarded? And what would happen if you were to choose a different context? Just choose an interaction where you want to choose a different context and see how that lands.
That question alone is game changing. Just reflecting on how you've been showing up lately, just pausing to take stock and ask yourself what unconscious mode you've slipped into. That alone is huge because now you can see it. And it's like, oh, I've been showing up kind of half checked out, or maybe I've been phoning it in at work lately. Is that how I want to be?
Yeah. Is that the kind of worker you want to be? Is that the kind of parent you want to be? Is that the kind of partner you want to be in a relationship? So just take a moment, anything, especially if something's not working right now. What is your default way of being? And what context might help you better?
Super useful. Just pausing and asking that little introspective question will pop you into the next level of self-awareness. And with awareness comes choice.
Yeah. So let's recap it. If you're making a CPR, you're choosing your results, and then that's what you want to walk away with. That's going to inform your purpose. Why are you doing this? And then that's going to illuminate a context. Who do you need to be? What mindset do you need to bring in?
It's amazing how we plan for all sorts of things instinctively. If you've got a long, complicated project or a home renovation or even a party or a trip, you'll sit down and you'll make a plan. You'll make a grocery list and you make a guest list and you'll figure out how many plastic cups do I need, right? All that stuff. You plan for these things because you want them to go well. And yet we don't think to do this when it comes to an interaction with other people.
Yeah.
And really, that's all this is a simple structure and a framework for planning so that a conversation that is important to you or an interaction that's important to you goes well.
Yeah.
And you owe it to yourself to do that because our lives turn on some of these pivotal conversations.
Sure. Yeah.
Our conversations not much turns on them. If you're just kind of shooting the breeze with friends, then great. Then your purpose is just have fun and connect. Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
No preparation needed, probably. But if you think back over the course of your life, there have been several conversations that totally altered the course of your life. You asked that person out on a date and they ended up being your spouse. And now you have a family with them. Like that's a conversation that was pivotal.
You had a hard conversation with a family member about, a defining moment in an interaction that you had with them.
Absolutely. There's been maybe a resentment you've been holding on to for years or decades and you finally addressed it and it changed the quality of that relationship. Or you worked up the courage to go and ask your boss for that promotion or that new assignment. And you don't always know in advance which conversations are going to change the course of your life.
Yeah, that's true.
Sometimes you just think you're talking to a stranger at a party and then 10 years later, you realize I've been in the relationship with this person 10 years and now we have a dog and 2 kids or whatever.
Yeah.
And you didn't know that in advance. But sometimes you do have a sense in advance that this conversation is going to matter. And when you have a sense that this matters and the outcome is important, it's so high leverage to take an extra 20 minutes, 30 minutes and prepare for it in this way.
Yeah, the CPR just it helps you set an intention, and it helps you have an interaction that just has clarity around it.
Clarity, I think, is you nailed it there. That's really what this is: clarity of intention. And when you've got that clarity of focus, you become really unstoppable. It'll tell you also what to respond to and what to ignore, and how to react to what life throws at you.
We have a mutual friend who I've spoken to about CPRs on a couple of different occasions because we've needed to use them in different interactions. And he said to me, I have a CPR for every moment of my life. He said, I don't sit down and write it, but like I pick a context everywhere I go. I know what I want to achieve, and I know who I want to be, and I know the purpose of why I'm doing those things. And I just set an intention and I set a mindset, and that's it.
Yeah, if you do this enough, it can become almost like you get in the habit of consciously charting a course through your life.
Yeah.
Which is super useful.
Yeah.
I would just encourage people to give it a shot. So think about some kind of interaction you've got coming up, whatever that might be, and take a few minutes, follow this exercise to prepare for it. And we would love to hear how the interaction goes, but equally importantly, we'd love to hear what your experience is like of following this framework. What did you notice about yourself and your relationship to the interaction as you went through this preparation exercise? And if you like this, give us a thumbs up and subscribe if you want more content. And, as always, we hope this was useful. Thanks for tuning in.